Uniswap v3 is perhaps one of the most notoriously difficult to understand and complex DeFi protocols there is. So you might have understood their V2 model with a constant product AMM quite easily, but maybe all this talk of range-bound liquidity and ticks is a little complicated and you just don't grasp it yet, and that's exactly what this video is for. Today we're going to cover exactly why range-bound liquidity was implemented in Uniswap and exactly how it's implemented and how it works when you are creating positions and even swapping within the pool. As always, my name is Owen, and over a year and a half ago I founded Guardian Audits. And ever since then, we've audited dozens of smart contracts and found dozens and dozens of high and critical vulnerabilities. And my goal with all of these videos and everything that I release is to distill all of the knowledge that I've gotten from personally spending thousands of hours auditing smart contracts and give that to you so that you can ultimately become a much better smart contract auditor than I ever could be. All right, without wasting any more time, let's get right into Uniswap v3. Okay, so first of all, this video from here on out is going to operate based on the assumption that you have a working understanding of the constant product AMM and Uniswap v2. So if you don't have a good solid basis of understanding for what an AMM is and how a constant product AMM works, then go ahead and watch my video on the guide to AMMs in the description below. Okay, so first of all, we need to discuss why range-bound liquidity was even introduced, right? Range-bound liquidity has a number of benefits for traders, liquidity providers, and Uniswap as a protocol as a whole. First of all, it allows liquidity providers to earn more fees on their capital by only providing liquidity in the ranges where traders are actively trading. So previously in Uniswap v2, liquidity providers had to provide liquidity across this entire x times y equals k curve. They had to essentially support every price on this curve. But now with Uniswap v3, you can specify a specific range, let's say that the tokens will trade in, that you are specifically providing liquidity for. And now to capture the volatility within this range of price action, you only need to supply enough liquidity to give the same amount of liquidity to just this range, rather than having to provide that amount of liquidity across the entire range in order to capture even just the swaps that are happening here. So the net result here is that you can earn the same amount of fees while providing a lot smaller amount of capital for liquidity. And finally, of course, range-bound liquidity helps to increase the overall efficiency of Uniswap. Since liquidity providers can take the same amount of capital and concentrate it on a single range of price action, more liquidity is going to be available for swappers, and so they're going to end up getting price impacted less and end up getting a much better price on their swap, which means that Uniswap is going to have a lot more value to capture, and they're going to be able to increase the amount of, first of all, volume that is going to be directed to the exchange, and then also the amount of fees that they can charge since there's no longer so much price impact. All right, so we understand at a high level all of the great benefits of a range-bound liquidity system, but how exactly is something like this actually implemented, right? So to first understand that, we have to understand the notion of ticks. So each tick is sort of like exactly what I've drawn here. They're simply tick marks, for lack of a better term, that we use to discretely divide up this range into individual prices that you're able to select where you want your position to begin and where you want your position to end. So how do we decide what the ticks are on this curve here? Well, every tick abides by this formula here, which essentially states that each tick is corresponding to the power that you have to raise 1 and 1 basis point to receive the price here P, an arbitrary price. So for any arbitrary price, there is a tick value that we can use to raise 1 and 1 basis point to receive that output price. And so this could be rewritten as the price is equal to 1 and 1 basis point raised to the tick. So going off of this formula, we are dividing this x times y equals k curve up into all of these individual ticks, where the distance between each of these ticks is exactly that 1 basis point percentage difference, right? So this tick multiplied by 1 and 1 basis point. And so is this one compared to this one, and this one compared to this one, and so on. Okay, so if we wanted to get the price that corresponds to a tick, all we have to do is raise 1 and 1 basis point to that tick. So let's actually go and do this on the Smart Contract Explorer on Etherscan right now. We're looking at the Uniswap V3 pool for USDC and Ether. And we can see the latest tick that this pool is on is 200,787. So when we do this calculation, when we do 1.1 and 1 basis point to this tick here, it's going to give us the price of 1 USDC in terms of Ether. Since in this pool, we can see that token 0 is USDC. And so what we have to do is take this price of 1 USDC in terms of Ether and then invert it so that we can get the price of Ether in terms of USDC. So first of all, this is an Ether value, so we're going to divide it by 1E18. And then we're going to invert it. And then we're going to divide this by 1E6, because that's the number of decimals for USDC, and we'll get that Ether's at 1900. It's been doing quite well recently. So Ether's at 1900. We can check CoinMarketCap, and we're at 1900. Okay, so you'll also notice that we have another variable here, the square root price x96. And so this is the actual price that the pool is on that is in between whatever tick range we are currently sitting in, right? So if that tick 200,787 just so happened to be this tick right here, the price is usually not going to be exactly on one of these discrete multiples of basis points here. It's going to be somewhere often in between these ranges here. So let's say this is that current square root price x96. So this is where the price is. And so let's try to get the actual price of Ether from this square root price x96 variable, right? So this doesn't look anything like the price we're looking for, but the name of this variable tells us exactly what we need to do. So what this variable is, we'll call it S, and S is essentially equal to the square root of the price, and it is bit shifted to the left by 96, so we multiply it by 2 to the 96. Okay, great. So we're going to use this to calculate the price, and this is of course going to give us the price of token 0 in terms of token 1. So we're going to get the price of USDC in terms of Ether. So here I'm going to copy this value, and first we're going to bit shift it to the right 96 to undo that. So we're going to divide by 2 to the 96, and we get this number. Now we need to square this number to undo the square root, and we get this. And if we compare this, this is our price of USDC. We could see this is 524,392, 600.99. We could see already that that's somewhat different from what we had here, as the price of USDC that we grabbed off of the tick. And that's exactly because it's not exactly the tick price, it's some intermediate price. And so if we use this to get the actual price of Ethereum in terms of USDC, we're going to once again divide by 1E18 because this is an Ether value. We're going to get the reciprocal of this, and when we get the reciprocal, we're going to divide that by 1E6 to get the final price, which is 1906.9 now. And we can see that the price of Ethereum has been going slightly down since we did that initial calculation. Okay, so we've gone over what ticks are and how we can compute the prices that correspond to individual ticks. Now let's examine how liquidity provisioning actually works within these tick ranges. Okay, so let's say I come and create a position over this tick range here. Let's say this is my lower tick and this is my upper tick. And so all of the liquidity that I provide is going to be basically split up across all of these individual tick ranges here. And so we'll have the same liquidity amount in each of these tick buckets. And now, so when swappers basically move the price in the pool up this way and it crosses into the threshold of my position, that liquidity is now going to become active. And so for each subsequent tick that the price moves inside of my position, my liquidity is able to get used in that tick. And then of course, when we cross out of my position and then we exit my position, my liquidity becomes deactivated and it gets subtracted from the active liquidity. And so it's worth noting that as the price of the pool moves throughout this range, my position goes from being entirely in token 0. So this is token 0 on the x-axis and token 1 on the y-axis. As the position enters, I trade into token 1 as swappers come in and use up the token 0 that I'm providing as liquidity. So at this point at the beginning of my position, I am entirely in token 0, and then at this point at the end of my position, I end up entirely with token 1. And so we can easily visualize this by translating this curve to the left. So this is just the liquidity that's pertaining to my position over this tick range here. And we can easily see that at this point on the graph, my position is entirely in token 0, right? It's entirely made up of this x here. There's no y. Y is equal to 0 at this point. And then as it trades along and as we exit my position, this point is entirely made up of a y coordinate and there is no x on this point. X is 0. This shifted version of the curve here is actually known as the real reserves. And so this is the corresponding formula for this real reserves curve. And you'll see it is reminiscent of the classic x times y equals k, except we have some modifications here. First of all, where L is equal to the square root of k, so L is the measure of liquidity that's provided on the curve. And so if we look at PA being the beginning of our position and PB being the end of our position over here, if we stretch PA down to 0 and we stretch PB up to infinity, we actually end up with L times 0 over here, and this cancels out, and L divided by infinity right here, and so this will be 0 as well. And so we actually end up with x times y equals k for this formula. So what this formula has done is it's taken the x times y equals k formula and made it specific to a specific price range that you provide. And so this is how we're able to calculate the liquidity provided by a position over a discrete range from PA to PB. And one final note about this liquidity provision and creating a liquidity position on Uniswap v3 is that you could actually create essentially a limit order on Uniswap v3. Let's say if I created a position that literally started right here and it ended right here, and let's say I wanted to have a limit order that swapped from token 0 to token 1 as soon as price crossed these ticks here, then that's exactly what would happen. Is as the pool trades this way, my position is immediately swapped at this tick. As we cross over this tick range here, my entire position gets swapped into token 1 as we trade up. And so if price continues to go this way, then I have successfully filled my quote-unquote makeshift Uniswap v3 limit order. But unfortunately, if the pool actually ends up trading in the other direction, then my liquidity is a candidate to become reactivated as we come back down and actually trade the other way and essentially reverse my limit order, which is not ideal for a limit order. But we do have protocols such as Poolshark, which are tackling this and actually giving an on-chain limit order like this that actually only trades one way, which is exciting. Okay, so we understand how liquidity gets provisioned in the pool, but how does swapping work to actually use that liquidity? So when I create my position, I initialize 2 ticks here, and this is the range that my position has provided liquidity over. And so as long as there are no other ticks that have been initialized in the pool and no other positions that are essentially overlapping with mine, then within this tick range from this tick to this tick, let's call it tick A to tick B, we're essentially able to treat it as a normal constant product AMM because there's no liquidity that needs to get kicked in or kicked out halfway through or anything like this. However, let's say that there was actually a tick C that belonged to somebody else's position. Let's say this was their end tick and maybe their beginning tick is somewhere off to the right here. But now if I wanted to do a swap that would end up placing the resulting pool price here and we started from tick A, what we'd have to do is we'd have to do a classic swap from tick A here to the target tick of C and then calculate the amount out and everything based on that, and then kick out this person's liquidity after we cross over this tick so that we can compute the rest of the swap, the remaining amount of the swap that needs to happen to go from C to the resulting price right here of X. And so this is exactly how it's implemented in the V3 code base. Is they have a while loop that looks for the next initialized tick, and they'll do exactly this. They'll process the amount in and amount out for the tick range from this initialized tick to the very next initialized tick. And then if the next range is enough to end up filling up the rest of the swap, then the swap will just end at exactly whatever the resulting pool price is. All right, and that's everything you need to know to get a high-level, solid understanding of Uniswap's V3 range-bound liquidity implementation. If you have any questions on any of this, don't hesitate to join us in the lab at lab.guardianaudits.com, where you can ask any sort of question related to Uniswap v3, DeFi mathematics, or anything that you come across on your journey to becoming a skilled smart contract auditor. And you also have the opportunity to take our auditor exam to become a verified auditor and qualify to participate in team audits of real repositories, conducting a real audit for rewards. And this way you get the chance to work with others in the space, learn from others, and sharpen your auditing skills as you construct a real audit report that you get to put your name on and call your own. Additionally, if you're still not 100% confident in your Web3 auditing skills, I collaborated with top security professionals from across the space to bring you the most comprehensive in-depth and effective training on smart contract security. If that sounds like something that could help you out wherever you are in your journey right now, then go ahead and take $50 off when you use the link in the description below. All right, that's all I have for this time. I'll see you guys in the next one.